Now, without further ado, I'm going to get the program started, and I'm pleased to introduce Stephen Thurston Oliver, Doctor of sorry, let me start over again. Dr. Stephen Thurston Oliver is currently Associate Professor of Secondary and Higher Education at Salem State University. He is a sociologist of education whose research and expertise is focused on using contemplative pedagogy in K through 12 teacher preparation and higher education programs as a catalyst for cultivating greater capacity among educators to engage across human differences. An advocate of environmental justice and sustainable food systems, Stephen serves as the board of trustees at Sturdy College, an institution focused on human relationships and the natural world. Stephen graduated from Antioch College in 1990 and serves on the Alumni Board of Directors. Stephen and his husband, Jonathan, who is also an Antiochian, live in Lowell, Massachusetts with their rescue dog from Puerto Rico. Stephen, take it away.
So hello, everyone. It's great to see you all. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be able to take part in a celebration of somebody who I love and respect and has just been a constant in my life for over 30 years. We were commenting earlier that we're all, bearded and graying now. And so it's just amazing to just see the span of time. And I appreciate the continuity that we're going to express in this conversation. The Horace Mann Award recognizes a contribution by alumni of Antioch College who have won some victory for humanity following Horace Mann's advice to the graduating class of 1859. And nominees for this award are persons whose personal or professional activities have had a profound effect on the present or future human condition. Mann, of course, was the first president of Antioch College. And just reflecting on what I've known of Keith over the years, we couldn't think of a better person to receive this honor. I'm going to read out some of your bio, Keith, and then I'm going to just invite you to tell us a bit of who you are, introducing yourself before we get started.
Sure.
So Keith is Executive Director of Collective Impact at the International Institute for Restorative Practices, IIRP, the world's first graduate school wholly devoted to restorative practices. In this role, Keith works with partner organizations both domestically and globally to pursue the IIRP mission of positively impacting social health by helping individuals find new ways to empower people and transform communities. He served as an advisor to the Maryland Commission on the School to Prison Pipeline and Restorative Practices and a partner scholar on several national work groups focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. His work with school districts and community-based agencies include the cities of Chicago, Boston, New York, Pittsburgh, Baton Rouge, Los Angeles, San Antonio, Washington, D.C., the Republic of Jamaica, including Kingston, and his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. In Detroit, he helped bring together schools, police, human services, court systems, corrections, and neighborhood associations that are working together to positively impact children and families throughout the city. Keith has also served in high-level leadership positions for the New York City Department of Education and New Leaders for New Schools. In 2000, he helped found the Youth Justice Project at the Harlem Community Justice Center under the Center of Court Innovation. He earned his Bachelor of Arts in Sociology of Human Development, class of 1990, and is enrolled in graduate school at IIRP. In 2000, Keith married his college partner, Catherine Kavanaugh, class of 92, and just celebrated their 20th anniversary. They live in New York City and have two wonderful children, James, a freshman at Marist College, and Ella, a sophomore at York Prep Academy. This is amazing, Keith. Anything you want to offer just to augment or share with us a little bit about who you are before we get started?
Yeah, so I'm honored to be here and I'm humbled by this, honestly. And, I just want to start by just saying I'm sharing this with all my fellow alumni. This is really not so much about me, but it's about the experiences and how I've been shaped and who's influenced me and how I carry myself forward in the world with all those voices and experiences and everything that Antioch provided to me. Also, just recognizing, the folks in my family and all the professionals and all the experiences I've had from the journey that you shared. I must pay honor and homage to them first. And I'm proud to be here and I'm proud to represent my fellow Antiochians at this time. So yeah, so it's great to be here and I'm humbled by this experience. And I can't think of a better person to have this interview with than you, Stephen. We've had many, many conversations over the many years, from Antioch proper to Seattle, Washington to New York. Our journey has been long and extensive, as well as with others. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
No, absolutely. And as I was saying at the outset, like to me, you are the man. You are somebody who I've respected and loved for so many years. When we were at Antioch, we called you coach. I don't know precisely where that came from, but that's how I think of you and how you're in my consciousness, right? You're somebody who over the years I've come to for counsel, always wise counsel, always accepting. You have a way of being able to affirm in people their own possibilities, and that's just been the cornerstone of our experience together. So we're gonna step back in time a little bit now. At a later point, I want to find out more about the work that you're doing presently.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to step back to your experience at Antioch College, and wondering if you could tell us about your experience there as you reflect on it now, right? 30 years hence, what did all of it mean?
Well, I'll start by saying it's always fresh in my mind. I mean, when you say 30 years feels like yesterday, honestly. And part of that is because of the relationships that I've been able to maintain over the years, whether they're people I stay in close contact with, or those that I still remember that are always, often in my head when I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So the experience at Antioch, really, I'll start with my personal journey. When I transferred into Antioch from Murray State University, I transferred in 1987. I was a lost soul. I mean, honestly, I was a lost soul. And I mean that by saying that I really did not understand in terms of who I was as a Black man. I didn't really know, I didn't have a worldview, I would say, that really made a difference. It was quite confusing time for me. And it was a really hard time for me. So um, Antioch turned that upside down. Antioch gave me a view of the world, through the experiences, gave me a view of the world. Antioch challenged me to really look at myself and identified, what I really wanted to do and what I was passionate about. Like, what was inside of me? What was it that my parents and my family and my experience in Louisville, Kentucky provided to me, and how did I want to use that and how did I want to shape that? Antioch challenged me at a time to stop acting like a fool, which I was acting like a fool at that time, stop being an unconscious person and become a conscious person. And I say the experience was shaped by relationships. And I'm very fortunate, and we'll get to this later, but I'm very fortunate to do the work that I do because it is about relationships. I mean, I feel very fortunate to have this journey that started off as a challenge for me to come full circle, and now to utilize the science of what it means to be in relationship and the science of what it means to build community, starting from a place like Antioch, which was about building community. I mean, the whole experience was about how to be in relation, how to live in a diverse community, and what it meant to actually self-reflect and bring your best self forward. And I can't think of a better place where this could have happened for me. So I pay a lot of respect, and I owe a great deal to Antioch College, and I owe a great deal to the people of Antioch College. and to the professors and to the community as a whole. I mean, what an amazing experience, and what a dichotomous experience I had coming from where I came from in Southwest Kentucky. So yeah, it helped me shape my values. It helped me shape my views. It helped me shape a perception of what it means to have voice, and what it means to belong, and what it means to fit in and belong, and what it means to have some agency to move forward and impact and change relationally with others, even when whether we agree or not, or we don't have a shared value. How to be present, and how to bring my best self forward. What it means to do that with human dignity was foundational at Antioch.
Beautiful. It's interesting to hear your reflection of it, because if I cast my mind back to how I remember you in those years, from my vantage point, you always had a sense of being grounded, a sense of sort of knowing who you are, pride of place in terms of where you had come from. I saw you certainly as further ahead in that journey than I was in that time, which is why I think it's a large part of why I found myself gravitating towards, that kind of centeredness that you exuded, at least as someone outside of you, how I was experiencing in the time. You spoke to some of this, but I'm wondering if you could think about what were the specific things in the environment at Antioch, right, in the ecology of that space at that time.
Yeah.
What were the specific things that you feel helped to facilitate your growth and your development in the ways that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with, just student power. I mean, the fact that students had some sense of power. It may not have been everything that we wanted, but the fact that we were allowed to be, I don't know if we were allowed to, I would say that, but we stood for change, and we were change agents, and we were active participants in a very challenging community. So that, whether that was through community government or opportunities to lead, or us just claiming and taking a stance on social justice issues and doing something about that, I mean, that was constantly happening at Antioch. And we weren't waiting to be told what to do. We weren't waiting to lead. We were leading. And so, stepping back for a minute, at the point when I arrived on campus, I mean, I was pretty good at kind of concealing and hiding. I knew I could always be a nice guy, right? I could always kind of be friendly, right?
Oh.
But that doesn't equal leadership, and that wasn't necessarily. It wasn't going to help me get to where I wanted to go. So I really had to be very honest with myself. And I had a very limited worldview when I came to Antioch. I didn't have a lot of experiences when I came to Antioch. And so having the experience, having the opportunity to be a part of smaller communities within the community that challenged my thinking, that gave me some exposure and an experience of looking outside of my own view and looking through the lens of another person's eyes and what it felt for them to experience what they were experiencing in structural ways and in non-structural ways, is extremely powerful. The professors, brilliant folks, and brilliant not just because of how they thought and their intellectual brilliance, but their humanity and their giving to others. The fact that they would be present with you in the classroom and outside the classroom. I mean, there are spent many hours and days with professors in their houses, at their dinner table, on the basketball court, one-on-one with professors who created a space for me, a learning space for me as an individual, and pushed me to grow and think. I mean, I think of so many wonderful people that gave of themselves as leaders and learners. It was just absolutely incredible, and helped me shape the tenets of what it meant, what it means now to be a leader and to lead others. That was because of the experience I had with people who towered over me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The co-op experience, oh my God, I mean, I can't say enough about that, because that's really why I came to Antioch, was to have this experience, to be able to go travel the country and the world, which I didn't do enough of, or a lot of, but the country for sure. And to be challenged to grow and become an adult, and to have these rich experiences in California and Boston and New Hampshire, New York, to lead on the campus at Antioch. I mean, all these wonderful cooperative experiences I had that got me out of my small, limited worldview that I had. In fact, Stephen, I'll tell you, the first time that I saw the ocean, an ocean, was when I was 22 years old.
Mm.
I didn't know. I hadn't been on the West Coast before. I mean, I remember this distinctly, going to see the Pacific Ocean with my dear friends at that time who were on the West Coast, and just being blown away. And that moment sticks with me quite a bit, because that was when I realized how small I was compared to how enormous
Mm-hmm.
things were. And that lives with me to this day.
Mm.
And it permeates through me and how I want to be, how I am a parent, how I shape the experiences of my children. I want them to be coastal. I want them to experience the world. I'm very, very, very attached and very close to the late 80s, early 90s of Antioch. It's at the forefront of my mind, and it doesn't feel like 30 years ago. It's in me. It's a part of my spirit. It's a part of who I am, and it's a part of how I lead.
Let's talk a little bit about, you've talked about the importance of community. Let's center our conversation a little bit thinking about people, the people that were part of your Antioch experience. You alluded to it earlier, but part of our journey was 5 years after we graduated in 1990. A job I had in New York City was coming to a close, and I made the decision to move out to Seattle. I think one of your roommates had just moved out or something, so you had a space there, and you said, well, come on, if you want to land here, you can do that. And I moved out to Seattle with like $800 in my pocket and no job, which I now think was a totally insane thing to do. But what made it possible was that kind of groundedness that you had, at that time, and have always exuded, that let me know, okay, this is a place that I could land, and there would be support, there would be encouragement, right? And so I see that as a way that the connections that I had at Antioch in terms of people extended way beyond the 4 years that I was at Antioch, right? Both of us, as we speak, married to Antiochians, right? People we met at that time. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how your journey has been impacted by the people that you met at Antioch, and how have those experiences or those relationships extended now across time?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, still in touch with a lot of folks from Antioch, from the time I graduated in the early 90s. I mean, I'm married to my wife, Catherine Cavanaugh. We met on Antioch's campus, and we've known each other since 1990, and have shared an experience both on campus, off campus, obviously, but now this whole nother journey that we're on, which is fantastic and fabulous. And then just whether, no matter where I lived, like whether I spent 11 years in Seattle pretty much, and had these touch points with people, including yourself and folks who lived in the Antioch community that were out there at the time, kind of on the same journey that I was on, trying to find myself and trying to get myself grounded and try to get my career to take off. And New York, I still do a social call with a dear friend of mine out in Seattle, JB Johnson, y'all know him. So I'm still very in touch with him, and Chris Williams, and you, of course, and Martin Ward, I still, try to stay in touch with, and people all over the space. It is still my community. And they still shape who I am. They still have an influence over what I do. My brother-in-law and best friend, Noel Saltzman, is someone who I still have known for probably the longest person I've known, the longest friend I've had for 30 years. And we met in high school. And so these people that really are something, that have meant so much to me, that have challenged me and pushed me personally and professionally, and have gotten me to where I am, I mean, I pay homage to, and that's why I started this conversation with that. I wouldn't be who I am, honestly, without them. Small and large ways, without them. It's a community that I can always rely on, and I'm so proud of, the folks I know that went through that experience, and the folks who are now having that experience, because I know the kind of impact that they're having on the world. I know the kind of impact that they're having on others. I know because I'm living that experience of their humility and humanity. And it's just so, so desperately needed right now around the world, and particularly here in this country. And it's just proud to be a part of a community that is shaping and pointing us in a direction that's helping us reclaim our humanity. I can't say it any other way. And living with dignity, and facing challenges. And all that had to do with my experience on that campus at that time, because that's exactly what we were doing in that microcosm, every day, all day long. And to be able to carry that experience forward with you out into the world has been profound for me. So many people to mention, but a lot of people that are still a part of my world.
Beautiful. That's a nice segue into the next question, and want to say to everyone that's listening, if you have a question you'd like to pose to Keith, you can go ahead and write it in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can with our time. But Keith, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the experiences that you had in and out of the classroom, and how that has informed the work that you do now, and maybe tell us, or for anyone that doesn't know, what do we mean when we talk about restorative practices? What is that work?
Yeah. So the experiences that I had in and out of the classroom, and there's one I'll give one example, a critical moment, and a professor that put me on the right path. And so many of you may know him, may have not heard of him, but Professor James DeRaja was someone who, at a time in my life at 20, pulled me up by my collars, really. And this is where I said, stop acting like a fool. He really challenged me to stop acting like a fool. And that was my journey to begin to understand what it meant to center myself and live with dignity, and with respect. And in fact, what he did was he offered me an independent study course that just blew my mind. It opened my world. And at that time, it was, that's when the Eyes on the Prize series had come out. And he just opened me up to all these amazing Black leaders and movements, and gave me his time and gave me his mind and spirit in that individual one-on-one space that I never would have gotten anywhere else. And I'll never forget that. And I will always remember him and thank him for that. And once that door was open, there was no stopping me. I mean, I just went forward. And as difficult as that was, and as painful as that was, to face yourself and understand that you've kind of been living a lie. Boy, what joy did I have after really getting through that grief, my personal grief that I had. So how that influenced who I am now, I became a social justice agent. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to have experiences in Seattle, Washington, working with gang-involved youth and, youth and family services in the Delridge community, and doing mental health work at a homeless residential facility for homeless, mentally ill community members, to New York, working for the Community Justice Center, and then to New York, in New York, working in education. I mean, these spheres and these arenas that I've worked in were all the perfect ingredients to be now at the IRP graduate school. And when we talk about restorative justice and restorative practices, first of all, let me say it is an emergent science. It's a beautiful thing that you can actually create a graduate school around a new emergent science that is interdisciplinary and built around the social sciences, where a centering point of that work is about social justice. But the emergent science is about how to build relationships, and be in community. And as you all know, Antiochans and anybody watching this, like just because you call something, you call it community doesn't make it community. You have to actually do the hard work of building that community, and that means the relationships. And so the restorative justice component of that work is about repairing harm. It comes out of a long-standing movement, indigenous people and BIPOC folks that have been doing social justice in communities way before we called it restorative justice practice. So I pay honor to that. And then there's been amazing thought leaders on the justice and practice side, folks like Howard Zaire and Ted and Susan Wachtell and Fania Davis and many other, Paul McCold and tons of folks out there that have been scholars in this work and really shaped what was happening on the criminal justice side to now what we call restorative practices, which is really a proactive participatory learning approach to actually building relationships and repairing harm. And so it's an intentional way by which we actually build community. It's an intentional way by which we use both a social discipline window frame, which is about doing things with people rather than to, for, or not at all. It's an intentional way of looking at fair processes, looking at what it means around affect psychology, what it means to have a continuum of practices by which it can be applied in many settings, including family dynamics, community dynamics, workplace, K-12, which we've had our largest impact, shaping national policy around that. For example, we've been able to turnkey zero tolerance policies into now social discipline policies, which really are looking at the ethos within a school community around how do we actually have better relationships so that we can actually reduce or eliminate the disparities and suspensions. That's an example of the work that we do. And so there's a lot of the science itself that is implied by thought leaders all around the world and in their communities and in a universal way around these constructs that shape what our science is.
Beautiful. We have a question from Kasima Boston asking, how can we use that frame with public health practice?
Oh, great question. Hey, Kasima. So great to hear you. It's been years. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're looking at health equity. And so if you go on our website, www.irp.edu, we do have a page about restorative practice and community health. The beautiful thing about the science that we have and our approach is that you can align it and synthesize it with other disciplines and approaches. So under the public health, community health, it is really a way by which those thought leaders use the public health and community health frame as a way to look at what are the conditions and what are the social determinants needed to make sure that communities are using their power in such a way to actually transform and promote change. And so first, it's a recognition that there's an inequity. And then there is this a relational component to that work around connectedness, relationships, and a mindset shift that needs to take place, and a power balance that needs to take place in order to inform new policies, new practices, and new resources that are equitable. And so if we're talking about these conditions of change, restorative practices can certainly be a way by which we use the power and leverage of people and communities to actually center themselves and stay connected and actually change structural things that are taking place. I'm very interested in structural change, but only when it's done through connectedness, relationship, and power balance. And restorative practice gives us that space to do that.
Beautiful. So again, just want to encourage people to go ahead, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat there, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. But Keith, one question that's emerging for me as I'm listening to you talk about the work that you're doing is just this present moment that we're in, right? Between everything we're dealing with in terms of pandemic, but also all of the challenges around racial justice.
Right.
And if I cast my mind back to many of those late night conversations that we had, we were always sitting with this question of, like, what does it mean for us to be in the world as Black men? but also balancing that with just what does it mean to be in the world as human beings,
Right.
right? So we always, kind of leaned into and understood all the different identities that we have, but first and foremost, it was about that human experience,
Right.
and just wondering what the things that you're involved in, what does that speak to you in terms of what's required of us in this moment, and how can we take care of ourselves so that we continue to be involved with the good work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned kind of a higher level. I mean, the aim is always about human dignity and our own humanity, but that's not enough, right? So we know that there's just a lot of misperception, and the conversations, I think, are not happening in the right spaces, perhaps. So sure, the aspiration is to always, for many of us, particularly, and we used to have these conversations all the time. It's a reclaiming of your humanity, because that was stripped from us, that was taken from us, right? And so, what does it mean to identify, and what does it mean to be a Black man? What does it mean to identify in many different ways? And how do we bring ourselves in these spaces when there's intersectionality, correct? So, a reclaiming, part of that journey and part of that work is reclaiming your humanity with dignity. And that means you have to do some consciousness raising. You have to do some unpacking and unlearning in order to learn what it means to center yourself and lead from that position, right? Because then you will constantly be stuck in this whirlwind of questioning yourself. And that's what we were doing back at that time. Our conversations were always about, who am I, basically, and what do I want to be, and what do I know about myself, and and that's where my journey began. But through restorative practices, restorative justice, and I highly recommend, a book out by Fania Davis. It's called The Little Book of Race and Restorative Justice, Black Lives Healing and U.S. Social Transformation. I highly recommend that book, as particularly on the racial identity side and the social justice and racial justice components, because of what we're trying to do is be truth tellers, and we're trying to reconcile the story that has been mistold, right? And so when you hear things about truth and reconciliation, whether it was in South Africa or in Canada, these all have components of restorative racial justice, right? So at a structural level, there's some things that we can do to actually get to truth. And then at a community level, again, there are things that we can do in terms of putting ourselves in positions as decision makers to actually shape new policy, to actually have new conversations about what it means to allocate resources. We're having that conversation around about the quote unquote defunding of police, when really understanding what that really means for us is making sure that these resources are getting at both the symptoms, the problems, as well as the outcomes that we seek in terms of how we want to be treated, how communities should be treated. And that conversation can not only just happen by those in position of power who've been in position of power for a long time. We have to begin to understand the power that when we come together collectively, we have. You don't empower me, I'm already powerful. And so if I'm already powerful and I'm coming from that place because I've raised my consciousness and I honor my own dignity and humanity, when I join you, Steve, now, there are things that we can do. There are actions that we can take. There are things we must do. And we only get in our own ways. In fact, I will say this, that systems are not designed to empower us or to help us. Systems are designed to treat symptoms or to respond, react. It's procedural justice. That's what systems are designed to be. We have to do the work in order to actually take things back into control. The challenges that we're having in community, we have to actually quit relying on systems to do that and start to do those things for ourselves in relationship and build communities that we want to see. We are the change agents because we have social capital with each other in order to do that. So, if we're thinking that these systems are going to change magically, we're kidding ourselves. And so I think that in order to do that, and I'll end with this, we have to have a frame and a practice and a set of constructs and push ourselves into spaces and a scholarship that goes with that in order to actually give us the way to do that, give us a blueprint for doing that. And we haven't really had that before, so to speak.
There's an interesting question here that kind of gets back to this this idea of the present moment, and
Yeah.
the question is there a connection between restorative justice and the movement for reparations for families of people whose ancestors were enslaved in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the connection would be in, and again, remember, if we're talking about restorative justice and restorative practices as as an emerging way or a science or a practice of doing things, there are many people out there that are using that frame and that lens and that voice as a way to speak to what it means to do reparations. Yes, I would say yes, and there are many thought leaders to do that, that do that. And again, it kind of goes back to the point I was raising about what it means to defund police and what reparations. These are things that we want to see, and there's a passion around what that means. But how we get there and the way we have those conversations is critical, right? So it always comes down to the relationships that we have with each other, and what are the stories and what's the shared dialogue that's taking place in order for us to move in that direction, transform and change that, and reimagine or recreate what that should be, right? That is the justice story. And that can come in many forms in many ways, right? But at the end of the day, it's about how are we getting our needs met in a way that gives us safety, a space to move forward, a space to actually move forward with dignity and honor. It's more than just the money piece. That is a big piece of it, or monetary piece. It also, there are elements in there that are more powerful than even that, I would say. That's reclaiming some things that were taken from us. And how do we want to create a new way of being in community, a new way to be in a community that intersects, where we actually are expanding the circle of having diverse voices. So I mean, my identity isn't just being a Black man. I have multiple identities that are a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to honor all those things. But I want to center myself with the obvious that I am a Black man in America. And that does have power and context. But that's not the only identity I have. So what does it mean to be a whole, complete person? And again, like we started with, Steve, it's about getting to that space of reclaiming your humanity.
No, absolutely, and that brings up for me something that I've always said to you, and I like to offer it here publicly. For me and my multiple identities, one of them being myself as a gay man, and the journey that I took to accept, embrace, celebrate that. Right, you accepted and celebrated and embraced those aspects of myself before I did.
Right. Right.
And I see that as, that was something that you gave to me, right? When we come back to that thing of what it means to be grounded, what it means to be centered, as I listen to you talk now, looking through the lens of all these years, you speak from a place of groundedness. There's a moral authority to, the way that you speak, how, what you're saying, the content of what you're saying, that makes people want to listen, that makes people want to hear more. I'm thinking about, students that I need to get you in front of so that they can see the full range of possibilities for their own lives. So I want to thank you again for that. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I'm wondering if there's anything that we didn't touch upon that you would like to say. Maybe it would be great to give you the last word here.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on the point you just ended with. So thank you for that, Steve. And you're my brother. I love you, and if I love you, I'm going to take care of you. And that means if I have to really look inward to change my view, so that we can both walk through these sliding doors together, right? Then that's what I need to do if I genuinely love you. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. We've been conditioned in ways to think that it really are not so good. And so I'm always on a journey of reflection and healing and trying to be a better self, a better me that I can. But anybody that knows me knows I love to love. I'm a Libra. So I love justice, I love peace, and I love to love, and it makes me feel good to be in that space. So I want to end by just, saying that, I think there is an opportunity, to give back to Antioch. I think collectively, everybody I know that's been a part of the Antioch experience are brilliant minds, wonderful people with souls and spirits that are really incredible. Well, I mean, I have to pinch myself to think about some of the things that folks are doing. And I think that there are young folks that need us. There are Antioch, there's a generation of folks that, that grew up. We talked about this the other day about on the cell phone, social media. Like, we didn't have those things. There was no beepers, the computer was relatively new, and so I think what's missing in American society is this wisdom, this elderly wisdom, this way of passing things down, this moral shaping, this intergenerational, cross-generational experiences that need to happen. And I would love for us to find a way to do that, not only to just lecture people, but to really continue to shape our own journeys and to give back to folks in a way where they really are looking to us and looking to each other to make sense of this world. I mean, there are more of us, I would say, that are on the right pathway and are doing the right things than not. And we have to remember that. There are more of us that want to do the right things and are doing the right things than are not. And we need to understand what that means and leverage that. So I'll end with that.
Well, I love you, Keith. Congratulations on receiving this award. It's greatly deserved, and wonderful to spend time with you here today as part of this conversation. And we will keep it going, hopefully for another 30 years. So we need to move on to the Arthur Morgan Award. So I'm going to pass this over to April.
Thank you, everybody.